Hey everyone, I'm Jack, and I'm back with the continuation of King Kong Month. I recently reviewed the original 1933 classic King Kong, and now we're talking about the 1976 remake. The original King Kong was a huge success, spawning many sequels and imitators, such as King Kong vs. Godzilla, Son of Kong, King Kong Escapes, and Mighty Joe Young. So it was only a matter of time before the film was remade, and that time came in 1976 when Dino De Laurentiis produced a new remake of the film, starring Jeff Bridges, Charles Grodin, and Jessica Lange. The film updates the plot of the original King Kong and changes it quite a bit. This time, an oil company is headed to an island called the Beach of the Skull, where there is said to be a load of oil for them to use. Led by Fred Wilson, they are joined by a paleontologist named Jack Prescott, who stowed aboard on the ship, and a wannabe actress named Dwan, who they found floating in a raft in the middle of the ocean. When they arrive at the island, Dwan is captured by the natives and offered as a sacrifice to the gorilla King Kong, who takes her off into the jungle, and it's up to Jack Prescott to bring her back. So as you could tell by the sound of that plot, it is a very different film from the original. The film is generally considered to be inferior to the first King Kong, and is even considered by some to be a genuine bad film, while other people defend it as a good remake. What do I think? I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not going to say that this film is terrible, but it's definitely not good. Let's start out with the characters. First we have the new version of Jack Driscoll, Jack Prescott. I guess they figured changing his last name would make him seem like a different character. But yes, this is a very different character. I mentioned in my review of the original King Kong that I thought that the character of Jack Driscoll in that film was a bit of a jerk. However, this Jack is a lot more likable. I like how they changed his character and make him a paleontologist who genuinely cares about King Kong and tries to defend him throughout the film. And at the end of the movie, when they capture him, he refuses to take part in their celebration event. We also have Jessica Lange as the new Anne Darrow character, Dwan. Now, this was Jessica Lange's first movie, and in some areas of this film you can tell, because her performance isn't always the best. However, in other areas, particularly the ending, she does do very well, and she does do a great job of showing emotion. I mean, you really do feel like she does care for Kong. Something that always bothered me is that in this version they just so happen to find her floating in the middle of the ocean. It feels a little bit convenient and tacked on. I wouldn't have minded if maybe she was just a member of the crew or something. But the worst character in this film for me would have to be Fred Wilson. I mentioned in my review of the original King Kong that I thought the character of Carl Denham wasn't really a villain. He was just a desperate man who made the wrong choice. But in this film, they basically just turned him into a one-dimensional evil bad guy who just cares about money. Also, he tries to give a similar over-the-top performance the way that Robert Armstrong did in the original, but it just comes off as bad and very cheesy. He has a lot of slow pauses and some really over-the-top acting scenes. Sometimes he's really over-the-top and really annoying. Now let's also talk about his demise. Now in the original film, Carl Denham lives and is the one who says the final line of the film. It was Beauty killed the Beast. But in this film, Fred Wilson is actually killed off when Kong escapes. Kong brings his foot down and squishes Fred, killing him. This just seemed rather unjustified to me. Yeah, his character was kind of a jerk, but dying just didn't seem like a very satisfying outcome for his character. There was an alternate version of the ending where he gets fired by his boss and is told that he'll be hunted down for his crimes. Kong's foot then comes down and only reveals his squished hat, suggesting that he has escaped. This honestly would have been much better because I just don't think his character deserved to die. He certainly deserved punishment, but not death. There's also the crew, and much like the original, they're pretty boring. And then there's King Kong himself. Now, in the original, the special effects were stop motion, and for the most part, it looks pretty damn good. It's a bit jerky at times, but it's still rather believable and easy to take seriously. However, with this film, they went the B-movie route and just put a guy in a gorilla suit. Granted, Rick Baker, who plays King Kong, does do all that he can to make the character sympathetic, and in some scenes, yeah, it really works. But in other scenes, yeah, it's pretty cheesy. He constantly has this silly, unnatural smile on his face, which is just goofy. And the way that he moves and wobbles around as he walks just doesn't make you buy that this is an actual animal. The original King Kong special effects, even though they weren't the best at times, especially by today's standards, were still easy to take seriously, and you could still believe that this is an actual living creature. This, on the other hand, is painfully obvious, though it's not nearly as bad as the god-awful animatronic Kong that they use at the end of the film when he breaks out. Yeah, that animatronic was designed by Carlo Rambaldi. Yeah, the guy behind such awesome animatronics from classics like Alien and E.T. designed this robot. The robot is awful, and it doesn't blend with the suit at all. The way it moves its arms in such a slow and lazy way is just cringeworthy. Thankfully, it's only on screen for a couple seconds, but you know what? Dino De Laurentiis, the producer, actually paid Carlo Rambaldi more money than he did Rick Baker. In fact, Rick Baker barely even got any credit for this film, despite the fact that he did 99% of all the King Kong shots. Now, seeing how this is a remake, some changes are obviously going to be made from the original. That's understandable with most remakes. I'm definitely not one of those people that just craps on remakes simply because they're different from the original. If the changes help benefit the story, then I'll definitely give it a pass. Do the changes help benefit this film? Some do, some don't, so let's talk about them. First, the name of the ship is no longer called the SS Venture as it was in the original King Kong. It is instead called the Petrox Explorer. It's a minor change, but I don't really mind it that much. I also like the fact that this film actually begins with the Petrox Explorer leaving New York instantly, and Jack Prescott stowing aboard. I like that this film gets going even faster than the original. The exposition on the backstory of the island is given while they're on the trip, which does add something to Fred Wilson's character. He only tells them where they're going once they're on the voyage, so they can't go back. The changes that they made with his character, as I said, I didn't like. The changes done with Jack Driscoll, or in this case, Prescott's character, were very good. They also changed the name of the island from Skull Island to the Beach of the Skull. I don't really understand why they changed it, because Skull Island sounds so much cooler. And speaking of the island itself, it's a lot more beautiful in this version. Sure, it had some beauty in the original, but it did also have some darkness. This is essentially an island paradise, and it's very beautiful to look at. It was shot on the island of Kauai. The villagers in this version are a lot less racially offensive. Also in this version, it's an oil company that is going to the island to collect oil and not a filmmaking crew. And this solves one major plot hole that was in not only the original 1933 Kong, but the 2005 Peter Jackson remake as well. And that is, how on earth did they get this huge-ass gorilla from this island to New York? They put Kong in one of the tanks that they used to haul oil around. Here's the big change, though, for me, that really bothered me. They got rid of all the dinosaurs from the original King Kong. Now, it's said the reason why they did this is because they wanted to focus more on the love story between Kong and Dwan, but the Peter Jackson version did a great job of including both. And yeah, I know most of you will say, well, the film turned out to be 3 hours long. That wasn't because of that. It was because of all the time they spent on the SS Venture. Skull Island is supposed to be this creative and imaginary place with all these different creatures on it, but here it's just sort of this island where this gorilla is. It also takes away from the fun and adventure of the trip, the different things that Kong and the sailors encounter on their journey there. And yeah, this film is really lacking in action or excitement. A lot of time is spent on what Fred Wilson is doing back at his camp, while Jack Prescott and the sailors are searching for Dwan. And a lot of this time just feels a little bit unnecessary. Yes, it's definitely building Fred Wilson's character up, but I think they could have easily shortened it into just 1 or 2 scenes. Then we could have spent more time with the sailors and their adventure. Also, in this version, there is a lot more of a love story between Kong and Dwan. I mean, in the original, for the most part, Anne was horrified of Kong. In this one, they actually do develop a romance. They updated some of the dialogue as well. Sometimes it could work, and sometimes it's really cheesy. The worst line in the film is by far when Jack Prescott says, "What could have gone in there? Some guy in an ape suit?" Yeah, it actually was a guy in an ape suit. As I said before, the film is extremely lacking in action. They try to redo the log scene, although the special effects of the sailors as they're falling is really bad. They fall extremely slowly, and that's probably because they're on wires. And we do have a fight between King Kong and a snake, similar to Kong's fight with the serpent in the original King Kong. And no, that wasn't a snake because it had legs. And the fight is really bad. It basically just looks like some guy in an ape suit wrestling with a toy rubber snake. I mean, the snake looks worse than Kong himself. It looks like some snake they just bought at a local store. The scene ends with sort of an homage to the T-Rex fight in the original, where Kong rips the snake's jaw open. I'll admit that does look somewhat realistic. Also, unlike in the original where we just cut from them on the island to them in New York, this one we actually spend time with them on their journey back. Also, when King Kong breaks out, as I said before, the Carl Denham character, Fred Wilson, is killed off in this version. There are some similar scenes in Kong's rampage in this film to his rampage in the original film, like a scene in which he attacks a subway train. Fun fact for Friday the 13th fans, the guy who plays the train driver in this version is the same guy who plays the character of Crazy Ralph in the Friday the 13th films. And of course, in this version, instead of climbing the Empire State Building, Kong climbs the World Trade Center. Though it makes sense seeing how the Empire State Building was newly built at the time of the original King Kong's release, and the World Trade Center was newly built at the time of this film's release. So it only felt appropriate to have Kong climb a new building. And in this version, instead of airplanes, it's helicopters that kill Kong. Also, in this one, it's not as much of a fight between him and the helicopters, as much as it is basically just them killing him. And yeah, let's talk about this scene. As I said in my review of the original King Kong, the ending to that film was very well done. It wasn't too over the top or dramatic. That is this film. As the helicopters come in, they start shooting the crap out of Kong. Blood flies everywhere, and it's probably the most violent scene in any King Kong film ever. Even more violent than any moment in the Peter Jackson version, and that was rated PG-13. Kong falls off the World Trade Center in another pretty bad effect, but then the moment when he dies is unbelievably heartbreaking. We then have hundreds of people show up, taking pictures of his dead body, and Dwan finally becomes a star, but at a horrible cost. This ending is just too much. It is way too dramatic and way too sad. I mean, the film literally ends with Dwan crying as she's surrounded by reporters. It's just too damn depressing. The original King Kong certainly was sad, but it was more sad in a classic tragedy kind of way. This is like a soap opera, and it just leaves you with a horrible feeling when the film is over. You feel ashamed of your own species for what they've done. The original still had this moral as well, but it was still balanced out in a way that didn't make you feel so awful when the film was over. So yeah, I've complained about this movie a lot, so you think that I wouldn't have anything good to say about the movie, right? Well, no, there are some really good things about this movie. As I said, Jeff Bridges as Jack Prescott is pretty enjoyable. The locations are beautiful and nice. Some of the changes from the original do benefit, and this film has an excellent score. John Barry, the guy who composed the score for the earlier James Bond films, composed the score for this film and did a stupendous job. Max Steiner's score in the original King Kong was great, so naturally the remake needed a score that lived up to it, and this definitely did. So yeah, this film can be cheesy and melodramatic, and it doesn't at all live up to the spirit of the original, but it does still have some good aspects. If you're going in thinking that this is gonna be the definitive King Kong remake that will totally do justice to the original, you're gonna be let down. But if you're interested in seeing another take on this classic story that certainly is inferior but still interesting, then I'd say give it a watch. I'm gonna give King Kong 1976 6 out of 10. And if you're wondering if I think that there is a definitive King Kong remake out there that does do justice to the original, well, join me next week. Till then, I'm Jack, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.